I didn't know that one sentence would turn an entire garage against itself. I watched a driver climb out of a wrecked race car, walk into a room full of cameras, and say 5 words that by nightfall had NASCAR's biggest stars picking sides. Nobody knew, in that moment, that a debate was about to divide legends, broadcasters, and millions of fans. Nobody knew it would eventually pull in a rival racing series, a national broadcast crew, and even the sanctioning body itself. To understand how this exploded into one of the most heated arguments of the entire season, we have to go back to Indianapolis. Because what happened there was never supposed to become this big. The Brickyard 400 took place on July 26, 2026, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Kyle Larson was running second in the field when his left rear tire blew out, sending him hard into the wall and ending his day before Stage 1 had even finished. Corey Heim went on to win the 160-lap race, and the total broadcast time stretched beyond 3 hours from start to finish. That single detail, the 3-hour mark, would end up mattering far more than anyone realized in the moment. But the crash itself isn't why Larson made headlines that day. What he said afterward, standing in the media center, still catching his breath from the impact, is what set the entire sport on fire. Larson told reporters, "A lot of our cup races are too long." He wasn't finished. Larson continued with a fuller statement that carried even more weight than his opening line. He said, "I just think the way that the world has kind of gone and how people consume sports, I definitely think our races are too long. I think 3 hours is too long." This wasn't a random fan speaking, and it wasn't a journalist stirring controversy for clicks. This was a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, 2021 and 2025, one of the most respected and accomplished voices currently competing in the garage. The numbers backed him up almost immediately once fans started digging. Through the first 20 races of the 2026 season, 13 of them ran past the 3-hour mark, with some crossing 3.5 hours entirely. At the Brickyard 400 itself, 27 of the 160 laps were run under caution, reinforcing frustration that already existed among fans long before Larson ever opened his mouth in that media center. What Larson didn't know was that his 5 seconds of honesty were about to split the entire NASCAR world in half. Fans immediately fractured into 2 camps. Some praised him for finally saying out loud what many had quietly been thinking for years, while others accused him of attacking the sport's identity from within its own garage. Before we get to how NASCAR themselves eventually responded, here's something worth mentioning. This channel, NASCAR Trackline TV, is closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and if you've made it this far into the story, hitting that subscribe button costs nothing and genuinely helps this kind of breakdown reach more race fans who care about what's actually happening behind the scenes in this sport. Now, back to how this fight kept growing well beyond just one driver's comments. Kevin Harvick was the first major voice to publicly push back, not against Larson entirely, but specifically against his proposed solution. Harvick agreed that the races felt bloated and dragged on too long, but he flatly rejected the idea of shortening race distance itself as the fix. He said, "I think we could shorten the races by 30 to 45 minutes pretty easy just by cleaning things up." He pointed to Indy specifically as his supporting example, noting it took officials 12 minutes to clear a simple debris caution and 30 minutes to run just 2 laps after Ryan Blaney wrecked on the track earlier in the race. With that response, the debate stopped being simply Larson versus tradition. It transformed into distance versus procedure, a much bigger, murkier fight that pulled in the entire garage rather than staying contained to one driver's personal opinion. The fight then moved from the garage directly into the broadcast booth, where Kevin Harvick and Mamba Smith escalated the conversation publicly while on air for Fox. Smith posed a pointed challenge directly at Larson and anyone else pushing for shorter races, asking bluntly, "Now, we sure can shorten it, but are you going to take a pay cut? Because that's what comes next is the pay. Like, that's how that works." Semen. The financial layer underneath this entire argument is real and significant. TV partners and sponsors rely heavily on longer broadcasts to sell advertising inventory, which means shortened races could directly threaten how teams and drivers get compensated going forward. The debate escalated even further when IndyCar driver Scott Dixon publicly weighed in from entirely outside NASCAR's own bubble, saying, I don't know. I find it really hard to watch cup races these days. It allows for a nap, so maybe that's good. Money, tradition, and shrinking fan attention spans were now all colliding at once inside a single conversation, and nobody involved seemed able to agree on the fix. Reddit and X went to war over it almost overnight, and the split ran deep across both platforms. One camp argued for eliminating stage cautions entirely while leaving the overall race distance completely untouched. The other camp argued that races have already been shortened enough over the past several years, and cutting further would disrespect the sport's endurance racing identity built up over decades of competition. A viral Reddit breakdown comparing caution lengths across different decades added even more fuel to the fire, showing that total caution time at the 2026 Daytona 500 was nearly double what it had been at both the 2015 and 2007 editions of the same race. That data-driven breakdown made the entire debate feel evidence-based rather than purely emotional, and it only intensified how seriously fans on both sides were taking the argument as it spread further online. X reactions piled on from there, drawing in even more recognizable names from within the sport. Kevin Harvick, posting on X, wrote, "I wouldn't shorten the races. I'd shorten the cautions. We can save 30 to 45 minutes just by cleaning up procedures." Dale Earnhardt Jr., also on X, said, "I don't think fans want fewer laps. They want less downtime. That's where the conversation should be." Motorsports journalist Jeff Gluck, weighing in on X, framed the entire moment simply and directly. That quote has definitely started a major debate. Everyone involved seemed to agree that something about the current race format is wrong. Nobody involved could agree on exactly what that something is. NASCAR itself eventually weighed in on the growing controversy, but without committing to any specific changes. Mike Ford, NASCAR's VP of Racing Communications, said on the Hauler Talk podcast, "If NASCAR fans are angry at the length of caution periods, I can promise you that NASCAR matches that displeasure." Ben Kennedy added further context around NASCAR's long-standing philosophy of endurance racing as a core part of the sport's identity, explaining how the length of cup races has historically been tied to that endurance tradition, while also hinting that the sanctioning body has quietly been testing shorter formats in lower-stakes events like the Clash. Still, as of now, no major rule changes have been officially announced by the sanctioning body for the Cup Series schedule. The garage, the fans, and the broadcasters are all now waiting to see which side NASCAR ultimately lands on, and at this point, nobody has a definitive answer to that question. What happens next remains completely uncertain. Every caution flag thrown from here forward, every single broadcast that crosses the 3-hour mark, will now be watched under a microscope simply because of the 5 words Kyle Larson said after climbing out of a wrecked car at Indianapolis. One sentence, spoken in a matter of seconds without any warning, managed to split the entire garage in half. The sport still hasn't figured out how to put it back together. If you found this breakdown worth your time, drop a comment with which side of this debate you're on, share this video with another race fan who'd want to see it, and hit subscribe. NASCAR Trackline TV is closing in on that 1,000 subscriber mark, and every bit of support helps this channel keep growing. If you enjoy real NASCAR breakdowns like this, you'll like what's coming next.